We're going to go ahead and start. Hi, I'm Danielle Haslett. I'm the HR manager with the School of Medicine. For those of you who I may not have met, I see some unfamiliar faces. I may have talked to you by email or by phone, but I don't always get to see faces, which is nice. So feel free to let me know who you are before you leave if you'd like. But thank you for coming to the School of Medicine's Office of Faculty Affairs and Human Resources Staff Toolkit Series. We do host these every fourth Tuesday of the month. Today we'll be talking about navigating the review process. Just so that you're aware, we are video recording the toolkit. They are available as podcasts on our website. So any questions that you ask, just know that the whole conversation will be recorded. And we have all of our past recordings, podcasts on our website as well. So if you're interested in some of the topics that we've already discussed. And just as a preview for next month, if you're interested, we'll be having someone from Police Services talking about keeping safe at work. So we're going to go ahead and start. As you can see, we have a few individuals sitting up here with me today. So part of the presentation is going to be half presentation. I'm going to go over the review process, and then I'm going to turn it over to a panel of these ladies who are going to tell you about how what their best practices are for making sure the reviews get done in their department. And I'll introduce you to them now. This is Corey Zimmerla. She's the Assistant Director of Administrative Operations for the Department of Pathology. We have, did I say that wrong? Robin Bissell, who's the Assistant Dean of Office of Grants and Contracts. And then we have Jean Holbert, who is the Assistant Director of Veterinary Services, who works over in the ARC, Animal Resource Center. We will also have a fourth individual, Carolyn Washik. So if you may or may not be familiar with Carolyn, she's the HR director in charge of employee relations with the university, and she can provide some university-related feedback as well. So we'll go ahead and start. Okay, so things that we're going to talk about today is what does the review process look like from start to finish. As a supervisor, and I'm not sure who my audience is here, so I'm going to kind of talk in what the supervisor responsibilities are as well as what a staff responsibilities are. We're all staff, we're all employees, but some of you may be supervisors as well. Writing self-evaluations and goals, understanding the merit increase and how they are determined. Getting performance feedback. So as an employee, how can you make sure that you're getting constructive feedback during those performance reviews and even outside of that review meeting? And then what if your review's past due? We're going to talk about what you can do to make sure that your reviews are due on time. And then we're going to have a Q&A time with our panel. Okay, so just some of the things to remember about the performance review process. They are conducted annually and they are based on your hire date. So if you were hired, let's say on July 8th, your effective date will be July 1st. If your hire date is July 23rd, it's going to be August 1st. The only exception is for individuals who are salary grade 18 and above, you're automatically a July 1 effective date. Salary review addendums, and that's the sheet that has your name. You usually sign it has the increase amount. That is the memo page that is sent from the Office of Records to department administrators, and then department administrators disperse them to your supervisors in your department. Review meetings should be scheduled by the supervisor, but also the employee should be aware of that review meeting. So that should be something that as a supervisor, letting the employee know, hey, I'd like to discuss your review in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks, giving the employee time to prepare either a self-evaluation or just prepare for that meeting. And then employees, again, as employees, one thing I personally recommend that you do self-evaluations. Sometimes we work independently that sometimes our supervisors don't know all of what we do on a day-to-day basis. So giving them a self-evaluation or a summary of what you do is a great way to let them know, hey, these are my accomplishments. Maybe you don't see them day-to-day and we don't discuss them all the time, but it gives them an overview of what you've done and how you think that you've done throughout the year. So at the review meeting, Supervisor, so basically you've all been in a review meeting, I assume. So supervisor should be reviewing the evaluation. So the supervisor really should be going through each point, explaining why they gave the employee the review that they gave them. And then talking about the goal, the overall performance and their expected goals for the following year. And even going over that, and as well as the past goals. And then the employee and supervisor sign the review. Both signatures are needed in order to process the review. So if an employee decides that does not want to sign the review because they disagree with it, the supervisor should be contacting me so that we can discuss how to move forward with that goal. If an employee, so as an employee, if you feel that the information provided is not accurate, does not depict your overall performance for the year, you can write a rebuttal, and that will be filed with your review. It is reviewed by Employee Relations and myself, and so depending on what you provide, it could lead into sort of investigation, if you will, talking to your supervisor saying, your employee raised these issues, we'll talk about that. So the employee does have the ability to have feedback from that review if you're not happy with it. One thing is supervisors are the ones responsible for making sure that the reviews get processed. So once the review is completed, supervisors should either be sending them directly to your department administrator or to my office directly. It's dependent upon the department. Some departments, the administrators need to process it or need to sign off on it. Some departments, supervisors send them directly to our office. So your supervisors should know which process, and if you are a supervisor and you're not aware of the process, I recommend contacting your department administrator who can provide you some information. All reviews are reviewed by me or someone in my office. We make sure that they include only information that should be included in reviews, not including any personal information. We look at merit increases, making sure that they're within the guidelines. Once we approve the review, we send them over to the records office. One thing about submitting reviews and making sure that we can get your increases in on time. So payroll has their own cutoff. HR has a cutoff. Our cutoff is prior to that date because we have to review and process the reviews, then send them to HR. They have to review and process the reviews and then submit them into payroll. So if you're sending them to us on the day payroll cutoff, we're not going to guarantee that that increase will be in that employee's next paycheck. We will do everything we can, but we can't guarantee that. And if it's past due, everything will be backdated. So you can let your employee know, I get this question a lot, well, it's July, it's August, we're doing the review, my review is actually due in May, how will I get paid? That first paycheck, that employee will get a lump sum amount from May, June, July, and August in their August pay, and then September going forward will be a normal increase. So supervisor responsibilities, one of the things we really encourage supervisors, know when your employees' reviews are due. This will help you put it on your calendar. We have several past due reviews that we are working on. So if you are an employee with a past due review, just know that our office is contacting your department administrators and your supervisors trying to get those reviews due. But as a supervisor, one thing you can do is just put ticklers on your calendar to remind yourself. Making sure that you are scheduling the meeting, giving the employee advance notice, obtaining the review forms from the HR website, making sure that they're the correct forms, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Making sure that you're aware of the university and SO1 merit increase guidelines. So you don't want to go into a meeting and say, I'm going to give you this increase. Well, how do you know? We want to make sure that it is in the university salary pool, that it is within the School of Medicine guidelines. It's also within your department's budget. So just because the School of Medicine provides guidelines, some departments might have to scale down their guidelines in certain years because their budget might not allow for it. And then completing the review and identifying next year's goals. And then as a supervisor, we talked about employees providing self-evaluations. You can request that as well because maybe you'd like to see how they're doing. So the performance evaluation forms. I did this presentation last year, and it was really simple. I could say, well, if you're not exempt, you do this form. If you're exempt, you do that form. Well, as you know, that we've had a lot of changes in exemption status because of some of the FLSA-related changes. So the best way to know to figure out which review either is for you or your staff member. So you have the secretarial, clerical, research assistant 1, technicians, maintenance, and staffs, and service staff. That really does encompass those positions. That includes department assistants, and that's what they're talking about, secretarial and clerical, and your lower grade positions. The professional staff now encompasses both exempt and non-exempt staff. So if you had a non-exempt staff member before and you were using the professional staff, continue to use that professional review form. And these are individuals who, if they're not a manager and they're not covered by the first review form, this is where they would fall. And then lastly, you have the manager and supervisory evaluation, which is obviously for those who supervise others. One thing I would note, and I do encourage people to use the Word version. So HR provides two versions of the performance review. There's a PDF and a Word. What happens if you, as a supervisor, if you write comments in the PDF and it goes beyond that block and you can toggle down, when you print that, we won't see what you wrote. So maybe you had all the bad comments up top and the really great ones on the bottom, and then we can't see how great they did because that's not going to print out. The word column will expand, so we highly recommend using the Word version instead of the PDF version for your comments. Merit increases. So I covered this earlier, where they're determined by the overall level of performance. So did you meet standards? Were you well above, or did you exceed standards? Just to note, anything below meets standards, whether it is slightly below or completely below standards, there is no increase. That is a university guideline. There's a university pool that's set out. This year is a 2% pool. And the SOM guidelines, based on all the information we're given by the university financial office, the school of medicine finance office, we then work with them to create what we feel is fair guidelines for the staff. And then what's your department's or your grants budget? What will that allow? And we talked about backdating the employee's effective date. And so right here, these are the 2017-2018 merit increase guidelines. And these were sent to department administrators. One thing I will let you know, last year we gave you had the opportunity to give vacation raises. That has been taken away by the university, so those are no longer going to be allowed. So we'll be communicating that shortly to everyone, so you'll probably be the first to know. So we talked about, significantly above standards, you can get up to 3%, up to 2% for well above, and meet standards up to 1.5%. In the guidelines, we also allow for an additional 0.5% for individuals who make less than $50,000. So there's no exception if you make more than 50. And if you're not sure what to do, give us a call. We can talk through the increase, what you think you should do. If you have some of your budget information from your department, contact the finance office, contact me. We can talk through that. So as a supervisor, what are your responsibilities during the meeting and after the meeting? And I say during and after because the conversations that you have with your staff, or if you're a staff member, and the conversations that your supervisors have with you, they should be continuing to have with you throughout the year. So you should always know how are you doing with regards to performance? Where do you stand with them? What are your strengths? What are your areas of needed improvement? During the review, make sure as a supervisor that you are engaging with your staff constructively. And if, as a staff member, if you don't feel like you're getting a constructive conversation, maybe ask some probing questions to get the information that you'd like. So things that supervisors should be talking to their staff about are past reviews and future performance expectations. This actually, I know it sounds simple, it's a simple idea, but it's really critical, and sometimes we want to, it's easy to just kind of fly by and do the review because we want to get it done, we want to make sure you get your increase, but it's so important to make sure that as a supervisor that your staff really do know what your expectations are so that they can meet those expectations. The last thing we ever want from a staff member is to fail or not meet your expectations because they were never clearly stated to them. While you may have already done the review and you may have already written the goals, consider their feedback. Consider the goals. You can always amend that form before you submit it. So if you think, hey, that's, they made a really good point, and that's a great goal. They want to, maybe you didn't consider any professional development goals, and they like to add a curricle on there. That's something that you might want to consider adding to their review before it's submitted. We talked about the merit increase guidelines. It's really recommended that you get approval for the review, for the merit increase prior to sharing that with your staff. For timing purposes, we understand that doesn't always happen. So instead, if you don't have pre-approval of the merit increase, make sure that your staff know this is a recommended increase. I'm not guaranteeing this increase because it's still subject to review by the School of Medicine and the university. So just know that you can never guarantee an increase to a staff member. And you want to be careful in how you word this, because this could be a morale issue. And if you're a staff member, the last thing you want is to be promised an increase and then have your supervisor come back and say, well, I can't give you this increase. Instead, we could only give you this. Where you were hopeful. Well, if you know that it's only recommended, that they're only recommending it, if we have to go back, at least there's some cushion there. But we do our best to try to be fair with all of our staff, give them the most that we can. But if it's not within guidelines, it makes it more difficult to really guarantee anything. So the other thing that supervisors should be doing is making sure that they're submitting your reviews prior to the effective date, so that we can make sure that those increases are reviewed in time and processed in your next paycheck. Supervisor, if you are a supervisor and you have a staff member who has some performance issues and you're not sure how to have that conversation, give either myself or someone in my office a call, and we are happy to sit down with you. Can I talk to you about how to have that meeting, how to discuss performance, even sometimes how to write the review. I've sat down with several supervisors and help them with their review, like what to put in there, what not to include. So you're not alone in writing your performance reviews for your staff. You do have support, so let us know if we can help. So as an employee, what are your responsibilities? Know when your review's due. So sometimes you might have to remind your supervisor. If you don't feel comfortable being direct and saying, hey, so-and-so, my review is due next month, one thing you can do is prepare a self-evaluation. It's more of a passive way of reminding them that your review is due, and it's really a great opportunity to showcase what you've done throughout the year. Being aware of your goals. So I'm guessing a lot of people, you write your goals and then we put them in the file and then we look at them right before we do our next review. So you want to make sure that you're keeping track of your goals. And if you did that, take them out. See where you are with your goals. So you can have that constructive conversation with your supervisor as to where you're at with those goals, what you need to do to improve upon those goals. Have you already met or exceeded those goals? And then what are some of the goals that you would like to achieve next year? Do you have professional goals? Do you want to get certified in something? Or is it that you want to take on a new task because you are looking for career growth within your current position? The other thing you might want to do is actually review the review form. So going over all the pieces. So think about if you don't do a self-evaluation, but if you review the form and say, well, I get myself a 4 or a 5 here, have in mind, well, why would you do that? So when your supervisor goes over the review, what if they don't give you that same rating? And that way you can have that conversation because you'll have in your mind the justification of why you think that maybe you did better. And hopefully you'll be surprised and they'll either give you the same or better. But that way you can also be prepared to have those conversations. And also be honest with yourself. What areas do you need improvement? We never want to acknowledge that we need improvement because we want our supervisors to think that we're great and we deserve the highest, but sometimes we do need a little help, and that's okay. So what do you need? Is it training? Is it just working with someone who has those skill sets, or is it just changing your goals around? Maybe there's some obstacles that are outside of your control that we just need to rewrite that goal or redirect that goal so you can be successful. And then again, preparing a self-evaluation. So for those of you who may have never written a self-evaluation, there's a couple different ways you can do it. The first one is just use the evaluation form. If you were writing that for yourself, if you're rating yourself, just prepare that and provide that to your supervisor. The other way is to, on a blank Word document, start writing down everything that you've done throughout the year. What were your accomplishments? How did you exceed the expectations of the position? You might even want to take a look at your job description and say, okay, this is what I'm expected to do. How did I go above that? Or, hey, I'm not actually doing this function. I'd like to, see how I can actually get more involved in this area. If you have a goal that you haven't met, maybe again, you need to rewrite the goal and make it, find some alternative strategies to make sure that you do achieve that goal. And then again, you can either submit as a document or as you can submit the performance review form that's already prepared. You probably.
I was going to say, so the Professional Development and Learning Center has a really nice online site on their ABC sign-up site.
Okay.
It not only tracks the courses you take within the center, but you can add anything that you've ever done within your professional development to that form online, and it keeps it all in one place for you.
Okay.
And I believe there's a capability to print out a summary every year, so that is another platform that the university provides, and you can access that with your single sign-on at the Professional Development Center.
Okay.
So if you'd like, I can show you later how to get to it, but it's
Okay.
It's pretty nice actually. You can track your seminars, conferences, courses you've taken, and not just within the university. You can track it without.
Okay, and I'm just going to reiterate what you said because it's not going to be caught. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you go to the university's Professional Development Center, they actually have a website that you can upload reviews or any type of professional development and then track it and then print out a summary of everything that you've done. Is that? Okay. Yeah, if you want to provide that information, and then we can share that on our podcast. Okay. So for those of you who may not be familiar with writing goals, maybe you're letting your supervisor write them for you, but you'd like to start writing them. One thing you want to make sure is when you're preparing the goal, make sure that they are in line with the mission, the vision, the goals of either, depending on how of the institution, the department, and the laboratory, but really with those research goals. So where do you fit in in the department? Are you operations? Are you research? So making sure that your goals align with all of those goals and mission of that area. The other piece that you may have seen before, this is not a new idea, is the idea of a SMART goal. So making sure they're specific. No one should be able to say, well, what does that mean? So make sure that they're specific goals, that they're measurable. You should not create a goal that says, produce widgets throughout the year. No, you should be producing 100 widgets per month throughout the year. And are they achievable? We want to make sure that we're setting our staff up to succeed and not to fail. So if it's an unachievable goal, we should really be rethinking that. Also remember that if you have a non-exempt staff, they're working either 37.5 or 40 hours a week. So if it's not achievable within that hour, you want to reconsider scaling back that goal or looking at overtime if it's necessary. Is it relevant to either their job or their career goal growth? And then time bound. So giving them a time. So, it can be something that they're expected to do by next year when you're reviewing their goals, or it might be something that you need done that you'd like to see them do within the first 6 months. So these are some goals. So the expectation of an individual might be to complete experiments to support the current research within the lab. So the 3 goals here, there might be some that are more SMART than others. So goal 1 is perform at least 1 experiment to support the research project per week. This includes collecting and analyzing data and presenting your analysis to the lab team. The second goal is prepare analysis of research data. And lastly, prepare data and a summary of the analysis for the project by July 1st. Are there any that are not SMART? Two. Yes. So goal 1 obviously is the best goal because it really covers all of the SMART attributes. Goal 3 would be an acceptable goal. There's probably room for improvement of the goal, but I think that might be one that a lot of us might have goals similar to goal 3. And then another example is, so for more administrative, so maybe your expectation is to develop and maintain the office's standard operating procedures. So goal 1, write SOPs for the administrative operations within the office. Goal 2, develop an internal training program to cross-train all office staff on SOPs, submit for approval by August 1st for October 1st rollout, and write and update SOPs as needed. It's probably obvious now, but which one is completely not SMART? 3, thank you. Yes, 3. So again, 2 would be the optimal goal that you'd want to include in your staff's performance review or in their goals. Goal 1 is fine. It doesn't really include. It's not too specific. So if your expectation is that those SOPs be written in 6 months, you really should put that in there, because otherwise, as long as they have it done in that year, then they are going to be achieving that goal. So really, that's why you want to make sure that it is specific and meets your expectations as a supervisor. And as a staff member, if your supervisor writes this goal number 1, you might want to ask some probing questions. Well, when do you really want this by? And maybe you can then adjust the goal to make sure that you meet those expectations. And again, when the supervisor meets with you and provides you with your goals, that doesn't mean that stops there. You should still recommend goals if you had some prepared. And again, remembering that they should be related to the performance expectations of the position and of the department or the lab. What are the business or research plans? Your own professional development and career goals. So they don't always have to be that job base. So maybe you want to get a certification. Maybe you want to go back to school. Include those in your goals. And then asking for feedback. So these are just some examples of questions. So, maybe you're not sure how to engage your supervisor. You might have a supervisor that goes over the review, doesn't really, discuss much, and you're looking for ways to have that constructive conversation. So some of the questions you can ask are, how does my performance compare to your expectations? Or what do I need to do to meet your expectations? That's a really important question. Sometimes it's you think that you are on mark, and they say, no, you were more of a meets expectations, where in your head you thought you exceeded those expectations. So find out, what does exceeding expectations look like to your supervisor? And then letting them know that you're interested in career growth. Maybe there's some opportunities that you can take on in your current role. So maybe you'd like to be promoted in a few years, or you'd like to maybe even go on to a different position within the university, but you'd like to be able to get some experience doing other things. Let your supervisor know there might be things that we can help you to achieve those goals and to gain that knowledge and skill set. Let them know your obstacles. So are they internal obstacles? Is it a skill set you don't have? Is it an external obstacle? Maybe you're having difficulty working with a certain department, or it's a interpersonal relationship issue with a certain individual, and you're having a hard time achieving that goal because of one of those external difficulties. So ask some questions on how they can help you. Maybe they have some ideas. What you don't want to do as an employee is come to them and say, this is my problem, what do I do? What have you done? What are your ideas? Always provide some ideas or some strategies that you have thought of, or maybe that you even tried, and let them know, this just hasn't worked for me. Do you have any recommendations? And then, again, going on to, if you feel like you have improved, let them know why you think you did. Maybe they weren't aware that you did something. Maybe, depending on your relationship with your supervisor, there are some staff and supervisors that work very closely. There are some that don't, and that some staff are more independent than others. So make sure that your supervisors know why or what you're doing and why you feel that you are exceeding or at least above those expectations. So the other question is, what do you do when you have a past-year review? And if you are one of these individuals, please let me know even afterwards, and we can make sure that we're reaching out to your supervisors. If you're a supervisor and you have past-year reviews, please get them done. So one thing you want to do, talk to your supervisor. Remind them of the date. Again, if you prefer to submit evaluation more as a passive way because you don't want to directly ask them to conduct your performance review, that's a great way to, again, give them some background, some information, what you've done throughout the year. The other thing you can do is talk to your department administrator or call me, email me, or contact SOM Human Resources at K-Study.edu. That goes to myself and another individual in the Office of Faculty Affairs and HR, and we will be reaching out to your department and your supervisor to get your review done. Okay. If you would like to see copies of your past reviews, most departments keep copies of your review, but if they don't, or if you're just not comfortable asking for whatever reason, you can contact your department administrator, you can contact the HR records office directly, or you can contact our office, and we'll coordinate getting you copies of your old reviews. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to our panel. And Carolyn, thank you for joining us. We introduced everyone else. So this is Carolyn Washik from Employee Relations over in Central HR. And I've invited the four of them to come and provide you with some kind of best practices, what works for them, what have been some maybe successes, maybe even not successes that you've had. And I don't know if you can speak to individuals both as employees and as supervisors, so that what works for you, how can we make sure that reviews are getting done, how do you have constructive conversations, what does that look like? So I don't know if you want to each take a moment and give some of your your kind of ideas on best practices. So Corey, if you would like to start, you're closest.
So my role in annual reviews for pathology is twofold. As the department administrator, I sign off on all of the reviews for the staff in the department. There's about 86 reviewed employees in pathology. And then I, in addition, have my staff, 8 of them, who I complete the review with the employee. I think the biggest pitfalls that I see for the research staff or staff that I am not supervising when it comes to not having the same opinion of the year between the staff and the supervisor is that oftentimes we are not supervisors communicating with the staff as issues arise. And so we're sort of maybe post-it noting or printing or putting things in a file, and then you sit down to do the review, and then you bring up all of these issues in an annual review that should have been addressed as they occurred. And then the staff are taken off guard, and they're unsure where this is coming from, and then there's a lot of morale and hesitancy within the working relationship. The second issue that I see with supervisors and staff is when the expectations are unclear. So a lot of our job descriptions are written with template language for a reason. Especially in a research capacity, your day is different every day. And even if you set a goal to do one experiment a week for however long, the reality is that things change very quickly for one reason or another. And so oftentimes I'm finding that faculty or supervisors have expectations that the staff are unaware of. And so those are different conversations, and those conversations should occur as, again, issues arise and not at the annual review. A lot of times I get involved at the department level when an issue has been brought up in a review, and then we put a plan in place for the year moving forward to eliminate that. As a supervisor conducting my own reviews, I meet with my staff once a week, and I think there's a lot of fluid conversations occurring with the team, and I feel very much a part of the team. It's sort of a big ship that we're all steering, and so I think it's important for all of us, myself included, even with those that I'm directly supervising, to provide feedback to each other on a ongoing basis. Problems, concerns, was I unclear? Did I ask you to do something that you didn't feel comfortable doing? Did I ask you to do something and it should have been your colleague's responsibility? So sometimes I'm unclear. And so I think, having a more direct working relationship with your employees is really important for the annual review process.
Corey, can you, one piece of feedback I often receive is, and this is going on the fact that you meet with your staff once a week, is, I meet with my supervisors, I talk to them almost daily, or as a supervisor, I'm constantly talking to them. How do you respond to that, and what makes those weekly meetings different than those other conversations that you have with your staff throughout the week?
So the weekly staff meeting is twofold for me. It was something we put in pathology about 10 years ago. The first 30 minutes of the meeting is business. This is what's going on. This is what we all need to know. Here's our direction. We do go around the table if there's just things to be brought up or projects that people are working on. And then the last 15 to 20 minutes, depending on time, is usually just sort of an open vent session. It's a closed meeting. It's a confidential meeting. If you're having a problem with someone, not necessarily in that room, usually it's not in that room, a faculty member, a research staff, a new hire, the chairman, whoever it may be, that's the time to bring it up. And we discuss it professionally with boundaries in a group to provide support to each other and to problem solve the issue. There are obviously other meetings that occur that are confidential, that are more one-on-one. But as far as using that as an excuse not to complete the review, or using that as an excuse not to have that communication about expectations and performance, I'm being recorded, so I can't say what I really think about that. But the bottom line is it's our responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
It is our responsibility to provide important, productive, ongoing process improvement feedback to the employees, ourselves included.
Okay, great.
So I'll go over the process that I implemented from day one, and I've done it for many, many years, is that I believe the review process begins from the day the person walks in the door. And the reason is that I am really an advocate of redoing the 30, 60, 90 review, that actually it's a working tool for the staff member and myself. It's a kind of being honest about it. What we start with is that we actually review their job description and the expectations. We go through what are the primary ones, what are the secondary ones, and it's actually a written evaluation that I do every 30, 60, and 90 days. And I think it really gives that honesty to the position and what the expectations are. And the goals are set during each of those times during the review. It kind of gets down to what Corey was talking about, is that it gives an honest dialogue of what's maybe working and what's not working. What are some of the pitfalls that maybe I haven't encountered before, or they haven't encountered before, and it gives us that opportunity of the one-on-one discussion to have with one another. After that evaluation, I'm in a small office, so there's 8 of us, and so we see each other every day. So I have daily conversations with the staff. I actually meet with them every day, it's usually like 15 or 20 minutes. It's just to kind of go over what the day is going to be like. Some things will come in at night, and then they just need some guidance with regards to what are the expectations for that day. I have monthly staff meetings, and similar to what Corey does, is that it's business first. What are some of the issues that are some of the new things that we need to discuss? And then after that, I do go around the table and ask everyone what their questions are, and then we will have an open and honest discussion of what some of the challenges are. And similar to, it's confidential, it doesn't leave the office, and we do keep it professional. We don't go down a road, and just to remind everybody that that's a road we don't go down. And then if there is that road, then I just have a conversation with them later that week or the beginning of the next week. Sometimes I let them think about things that have been said. And then the other part with regards to the review is what I actually encourage them to do is to keep a folder of all their accomplishments that they've made during that period of time. So they can actually go back and just pull it out and to remind them, because I think that everybody does so many things in today's working environment that we all forget all the great contributions that are made, not only to their department, but to the school and to the university. And I think we forget those. And so I like them to use that as a tickler. I do it for myself to remind me as I'm doing my own evaluation. I go through a stack of papers and I do it in order. But I also have them do their own accomplishments. So I always ask them for their top 10 accomplishments that they see are really important to them. To give me their top 10 ones, which is the most important, and then any others that they want to add. There could be letters that they've received of, accomplishments or thank yous that are really dear to everybody, because we don't always hear a thank you, or we don't always know that someone's been sent a note. So it's really nice to have that as part of it. So I actually have them do their own. They send it to me. We actually review that together before I even do the performance evaluation. Because I really want to have an open dialogue first, and then I will actually write up the performance evaluation and review it for them. Because I think it gives them that opportunity to really have that conversation, to agree, to disagree, and it's okay to disagree on some items. So that's the general practice I will go through. So I'm sometimes waiting for their accomplishments to come to me before I can give them to HR. So sometimes it puts me a little behind on getting those through. But I do think that they are so important, and I think that there should be no surprises when someone receives their performance evaluation. There just shouldn't be anything in there, even when they give you their top 10 accomplishments. It certainly is a time about them. I think if anything has happened during the year, it's an open dialogue with them, so there's no hidden agendas on any of the performance evaluations. I really look at it as anything that may have been ongoing during that year. I really want to address it way before the performance evaluation in fairness to the employee, the staff, to make any corrections that perhaps need to be made during that period. So I really just believe in the transparency and honesty of bringing it to the table. It's like I don't like to have surprises. If I were to have an evaluation, I'm like, really? I didn't know that. So I always extend the same courtesy to the staff. And again, I always go back to, I think that we have amazing staff here that do such amazing jobs and just don't always get recognized. When we look at the increases that we've been able to give our staff over the years, and the amount of time that they give us is just really amazing. To me, that's the time to acknowledge it in the write-up.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. Jean?
My story is a little bit different. About 4 years ago, our department has about 57 to 65 people. We were in a bit of disarray, and we just didn't have an administrator that was coordinating the performance evaluations. And so we would get these little envelopes in our mailboxes. They might be on time, they might not be. Some supervisors never received those envelopes. Reviews were not getting done. Employees were very upset, asking, where's my review? Why haven't I got my review? So about 4 years ago, I participated with the administrator in getting our evaluation process more coordinated and moving in the right direction. So we now have an administrator that receives the information, disperses it to the supervisors personally in a confidential envelope. They're always on time as far as giving that information to the supervisors a month in advance. so that the supervisors can get the performance evaluation turned around and submitted to HR in a timely fashion. So we've done a complete 360, and the supervisors are happier. They're able to get their evaluations in and processed and feel good about it. Our employees are happier because they're actually getting their, financial increase on time and when appropriate. So it's been a great experience to live through. I never want to go back to where we used to be. And so I think it benefited both the supervisors and the employees, just getting more coordinated and more organized and having an administrator to assist with that. I also agree with both of their comments about not waiting, not surprising the employee with anything in their annual review that you wouldn't have already addressed throughout the year. So that's very important. I know I've gotten feedback from the employees saying, please let me know if I'm doing something right away. If I'm not meeting your expectations, please let me know sooner than later. Don't wait until the year has passed and then bring it up during the evaluation.
Jean, just a question
yeah.
to follow up with that. So when we are requesting for a review that might be past due to get turned in, sometimes we get the response of, well, I'm really busy, I'll get to it when I can. Have you found that creating a more organized structure, when you say your supervisors are happier, has there been a change in their productivity with this new organization?
As far as the supervisor's productivity?
Yes.
Yes. So there's less time wasted worrying and stressed and the pressure. So they know it's coming, they've gotten ample notice, they're prepared, they get 30 days to do it. So it has alleviated stress from a supervisor level as well. So that's actually a really good point.
Right. Great, thank you. All right, and now we have Carolyn Washik from Employer Relations. I don't know if you want to talk to us about, you're a supervisor, but then you also help manage the process for the university. So kind of share with us your thoughts.
So I like a lot of the comments that were made today. I think there's a lot of great suggestions and ideas. So from a policy standpoint, I think always doing the orientation reviews, the 30, 60, and 90-day review, or if it's somebody that's new to the university, a 45-day review and a 90-day review. It's always good to give feedback in writing to somebody and let them know how they're doing. And ongoing feedback is essential. So if somebody's not meeting your standards or your expectations, letting them know right away so that they can improve on those, or if they're doing a good job, letting them know they're doing a good job. Everyone wants to hear feedback, either positive or negative, in terms of how to improve or how to continue to do a good job. And then setting goals for the employees after the 3-day mark, so that they have attainable goals for the next 9 months. So when their annual review comes, they know what they're going to be measured against. So, setting goals, though, back to what Danielle said, that are SMART goals. So if you're going to set a goal for somebody, making it a 9-month goal, not a goal that would be accomplished in a year. So making sure they're reasonable as well. A lot of times people think that they may be reasonable, but then when questioned about it, they are not attainable in that 9-month period. They're only attainable in the year period. And then making sure that when you're doing the annual review, back to the no surprises. So if somebody's going to get a review that's not favorable, making sure they know that there's been issues and concerns. And it's not at the review time that they're getting this feedback that they've gotten customer complaints or that their productivity hasn't been, has not met standards. Because surprises like that, really cause an issue with the trust between a supervisor and employee, because they feel like, if there were issues, I should have known about them as they occurred. Now, there's some cases, though, when supervisors maybe are not finding out that there's issues and concerns until it's closer to the review, but making sure as soon as the supervisor knows those things have, come up, that they address them. So those are good ways to make sure your employees know, how things are going in terms of performance. From a university standpoint, I know Jean talked about the fact that 30 days ahead of time, a review is sent to a supervisor, so that gives them notice that the review is due in 30 days. A best practice is to have the supervisor send the review to the employee, a blank one, and have them do a self-appraisal. telling you all the things they've accomplished in the year, all the things that they've gotten compliments on, so that you as a supervisor can kind of also look at those things and incorporate those into the review. And the review is, once the review is due, they should get it within that month. Once a review is late more than 30 days, employee relations is involved. And Danielle's office also does a great job of following up and trying to make sure that those late reviews are completed. If they're not completed and it's 3 months, we run quarterly reports that do go to senior leadership. It's sent to the Vice President of Human Resources, who in turn sends it to senior leadership, and they start following up, and they start making supervisors be accountable for having a late review. Because to everybody's point, getting a late review, it impacts their morale. It also impacts financially as well. Because if you don't get your review on time, that's contributions to your retirement, all different kinds of things that it can affect. So having a timely review is very important.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time? No? Okay. So some of the other things, and I don't know whoever would like to respond, but can you talk about how would you respond to maybe as a department administrator or HR, if maybe an employee comes to you and says, I met with my supervisor, I'm not happy with my review. How would you coach that employee? So I don't know, Carolyn, if you want to take that, or?
So if somebody receives a review that they feel like they want to write a response to, or they feel it's an unfair review, every employee has a right to write a response to their review. You want to make sure, though, that what you write in that is a response to the review that's not based on subjective data. It should be based on, the data that will prove, maybe to Danielle's point, you're going to make 100 widgets in a month, and maybe the supervisor said you only made 40 widgets in a month. Make sure you have the data to show why you really made 100 widgets in a month, and have that documentation to supply with that response to the review. So putting together a response to the review, employee relations is willing to look at those responses and try to give feedback on that, and I think Danielle's office is as well. And then you supply that back to your supervisor to see if maybe there's some reason why that review needs to be relooked at or revised. It's also attached to your review and will be placed in your personnel file. So that's a way to respond to your review.
I try to get involved before it goes to employee relations or to Danielle. I think most common is, a research assistant who will come to my office and their supervisor is a faculty member and they're unhappy with their review. Usually I sit down and go over their review. I pull out their job description. I have a conversation with them. I ask them to do goals. I ask them to do achievements, and then I usually let them know I'll follow up with them in a couple of days, that at this time I'm not signing off on the review, so I'm not submitting the review. And then I usually reach out to the faculty member. I think, again, I go back to my biggest pitfall is that unclear expectations. That, so the faculty will say, well, here's all these issues that I had. We'll look at prior year's review, and there's no mention of it here. We're looking at current review, and it's just fully loaded. And so a lot of times what I'll encourage them to do is put something in writing to the employee, very clearly defining the expectations and making sure they're obtainable and reasonable. And either we do delay the submission of it so the employee has the ability to know the new goals, or I'll change the wording to goals rather than issues, because I think, again, if you don't know what to do, you do the best you can. And so we try to, and then usually I have a meeting then with the faculty and the staff, and then I'll review, not the review itself, but the documentation of expectations, so that everybody's on the same page. I usually do reach out to employee relations or Danielle's office and let them know this review is going to be late. We've got a couple of weeks, a couple of months of work that we need to do, and I don't want it to be a PCA issue. If it's just I didn't know what the expectation was, it's not PCA. It's just unclear, communication. So.
Yeah. And then I also think it's important both on the supervisor side and the employee side. So if if an employee feels like they have a reason why one of the rankings need to be changed, having open dialogue and conversation and being open to hearing why they feel that the rating needs to change. That's another way to also, talk through why this needs to be changed or why it needs to be reviewed.
I have a question. Is there an expectation, I mean, it's really more for YouTube, but of what you're looking for on a review? I mean, I know that I've not been doing that the way other people did them. So, you looking for goals and how they were reviewed for that year that's passed, and you're looking for goals that were set going forward?
So to reiterate, so we hear your question, you're asking what school medicine and central HR's expectations are of reviews as we're reviewing them. I can tell you, because it hits me first. So what I look for is, one, is it completed? So are the objectives? Are the objectives for the last year completed? Have they created? I know that there's a mid-year section, a mid-year notes. If you didn't do a mid-year, that's fine. Just write end of year notes and how do they do, and their rating. And then section 2 where it talks about the different attributes, and we're looking for that, and some feedback in there as well. And then the comments page. If I receive a review with no comments, I'm going back to the department saying I won't process without these comments. That's the meat. That's where we really want to know where did that employee shine, and also what were some of the issues. And so the whole review needs to be completed. It also needs to be signed by the employee and the supervisor. If I've received reviews without employee signatures, those will not be processed. And I'm thinking that's probably that is same with the university. So it really needs to be completed in full. Other things to look for, and Carolyn, you might touch on this too, but we do review the reviews themselves to make sure, like if, let's say the individual was on FMLA, if there's any talk of FMLA, it has to be rewritten. We can't talk about any type of personal leaves or personal health issues, anything perception. I feel this. We don't want to know what your perception is. We don't want you to psychoanalyze your staff. We want you to tell us what are the facts. Tell us the what. What did they do? To make sure that they are getting as objective of a review as possible. We acknowledge that the review form itself allows a lot of subjectivity. So with having the checks and balances of multiple review stages to make sure that the wording in the review is very objective. So and then for school medicine, also making sure that the merit increase is in line with the guidelines, and then the overall ratings. That's the other thing. So if you're going to rate your staff all down the middle and give them 3s, but you're going to tell me they exceeded the goals, well, that doesn't make sense. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen someone where they're saying, well, they exceeded their goals, but they're rating them lower. So and I'll let Carolyn, you talk on kind of how you determine the actual point, but I look for consistency throughout department equity also. So if you have a supervisor who's, if I get 2 reviews and they're getting the same, maybe they have the same rating, the same supervisor, they have the same rating, but one they're asking for a 2%, maybe the other is a 2.5. I'm going to go back and say why, because they're rating them the same. I don't see anything special about this review. So we try to look at equity as well. So
I see people do the section 1 objectives and they're blank. And I've never done that. I do it for the prior year, but then someone else is doing it setting those going forward. They're not meeting, and I've not done that.
So the objectives, what we really want to see is how did they do last year. If you want to keep the objectives for the next year in your own personal file, that's fine. If you want to include them, that's even better, because then we have a record of them. But ideally, we'd like to see how did they do with that previous year's objectives. But again, either one.
We should be setting objectives for the following year.
You should be.
Well, the objectives should be driven by their job descriptions.
Right.
Yes, that's,
So-
I write them that way.
Right.
Yes.
That's correct.
So the objectives, unless their job description has changed, should not
Really shouldn't
change
change,
that.
Right.
concept.
That needs to be
Yeah.
built. I am doing it right.
And so to Danielle's point, so we also look at the ratings. Like, so if somebody's getting, and we kind of look at it on a scale. So, it's like a 1 to 5 scale. So if somebody's getting, consistently 1s, but you're going to overall give them a 5, we're going to question that. So you should look at the ratings. So if there's 9 ratings, you should average those ratings together to come up with the overall rating. when we see something that looks different than that, we will push back and ask questions why. Because you want to make sure that the review is consistent and that you're giving them an overall rating that mirrors what the rankings have been throughout the review. And Danielle's point, we do look for language, so if there's commentary about personal lives, things about medical leaves, anything that's unnecessarily in that review, we will ask them to remove that. So it should be based on the facts related to how the person did in their position.
Okay, thank you. I know, I apologize, we are a few minutes after noon, so I don't want to keep you. Before we leave, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for attending today's toolkit. I hope that you learned some new information. If you have other questions, maybe you didn't want to ask in the open forum, please don't hesitate to contact my office, ask me directly. I'll be here for a few minutes. I don't know if the panel members will, if you have any questions for us. Please don't hesitate. There are beverages and snacks available. Please help yourself. And also there's the evaluation form and sign up sheet. If you didn't get a chance to sign up, please do so, and please evaluate us. Let us know how we did. We also want to hear your feedback and what you'd like to see as we're continuously scheduling the following months and the following year's toolkits. We want to know what you're interested in. So maybe there's a topic you haven't seen yet. Please let us know so we can try to accommodate that. So thank you again, and thank you to the panel. We appreciate your time.
Okay.